Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Born of the Gods. This is the last quarterfinal match. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm in the booth with Zach Hill and Hall of Famer Randy Buehler. You get a look at our first opponent from Germany. His name is Patrick Dickmann, and he is playing, what do we call it?
Tarmo Twin.
Tarmo Twin.
Yeah,
Splinter, Goif, whatever.
Tarmo Twin.
So it's rug, it's blue, red, and green, and it is a combo deck that also is able to apply pressure. He's playing against Christian Seibold, who's also from Germany, and he's playing, well, we call it affinity.
Yeah, it's affinity.
I'm calling it affinity.
Thank you.
I figure like a little history lesson for a new player is in order, you know, like you can look it up. All right, so here it goes. Christian Seibold. Now this is going to be much different than what we've been seeing in the last match, which was basically two control decks going at it. That is a spring leaf drum from Christian Seibold. Randy, what are we going to look for from Christian's side? Or actually, Zach, are you?
I'll take
You're
Christian.
sitting in for Christian? All
I'm
right,
sitting
so
in
Zach,
for
what are we looking at
So
here?
basically, he's just looking to flood the board with permanents. He has a Signal Pest, 2 Steel Overseers, and a Welding Jar to keep him alive. Welding Jar really, really good against the bolts that are flooding the format. But, you know, basically the Affinity deck just wants to dump its hand on the ground as much as it can. Big top deck there with Ornithopter and Springleaf Drum, allowing him access to 2 mana this turn.
So he gets a Steel Overseer on the battlefield. Now, on the other side, Patrick, what is he looking for? What is Patrick going to be doing here, Randy?
I mean, a lot of it depends on his draw. He's got this twin combo built into his deck, but he's also got the ability to be aggressive with Tarmogoyfs. Against Affinity, he's going to want to Lightning Bolt the key creatures. So, he just ran one into a Welding Jar there, which is what he was...
He had to do it sometime, used up his mana on end step. And he has a Scavenging Ooze to add to the battlefield here. So not perfect, but at least he's keeping his momentum going forward here. Passes the turn back to Christian.
Oh, that
he
was
finds
a huge
Cranial Plating right off the top of the deck there. He also has a couple of other cards in his hand there, though. But
it's really Cranial Plating
matchup.
It is the best card in this deck by far.
Right.
Your whole deck is full of artifacts, and then there's really 2 cards that take advantage of it. One is Cranial Plating, the other is Arcbound Ravager. And of the 2, the Plating is usually the one that hits harder and faster and easier.
Now, what we might be seeing right here, though, is actually Affinity or Robots, whatever we call it, Plan C, which is a bunch of creatures and Steel Overseers. This Steel Overseer already putting a counter on each of these, so you know, growing those in size pretty substantially.
So Christian's basically taking the go wide as opposed to go tall approach here in the early parts, and he's still going to get the go tall approach with the Cranial Plating later.
None of this stops him from playing Cranial Plating. He didn't have the ability to equip the Cranial Plating on that turn since he's only got the 2 mana. It's 2 to cast, 1 to equip. But yeah, now he's set up. He also can get the other creature into play as quickly as possible, so the Overseer does even more good.
All right, so Patrick cracks a Misty Rainforest. He's going to go grab a land. Now, one of the things that we're going to keep an eye on as well from Patrick's side, remember, he is 3 colors here, and your mana base can catch up to you. This whole format revolves around fetch lands and shock lands, as we call them, and you can add up a lot of damage pretty quickly when you're facing an aggressive deck.
Yeah, this matchup's really a race. Like, the Tarmogoyf plan is not the way he's going to beat the Affinity deck. It's the combo.
He wants to combo.
Yeah, he wants to combo. That's the way he's going to win. That's how he can race. Affinity just deals damage faster than Tarmogoyf does.
Okay.
Affinity's also got all these random dorks like Ornithopters and Manlands that can chump block at Tarmogoyf if push comes to shove.
All right.
So Dickmann really wants to combo kill, and he's got Exarch in his hand. What he does not have is the Splinter Twin.
The thing that's nice about that Exarch and the 2 copies of Exarch as well as Cryptic Command is it buys him a lot of time. Cranial Plating until Seibold is able to get access to 2 black mana can only go on 1 creature per combat. If he's able to tap that creature down, that's a lot of damage he's saving.
With the Exarchs.
Exactly.
Nice. Exarch to tap your plating guy, Exarch to tap your plating guy, Cryptic Command to tap everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
He can buy significant time here.
Now, what of course is still happening while that happens is all of these Steel Overseers doing their work. But, you know, like Randy pointed out.
Oh, he drew a Snapcaster. Flashback a bolt.
Oh, that's huge.
All
Down
right, so
goes Steel Overseer.
He's going to take down 1 Steel Overseer, though 1 is really all you need if you're on Christian Seibold's side of the table. So
1's a lot slower than 2.
That Midnight, they're really good, actually.
Yeah, he's also got a Signal Pest, so he's going to be able to commit 2 more bodies to the table this turn. Here it is, Steel Overseer ticking up even more, make it a 3/3, 2 power over on the Ornithopter, and then of course pump the 2 new creatures, and he's going to battle for 2 here.
Interesting that he's using Steel Overseer right away, a card that I've seen be played, although not in the top 8 right here is actually Sudden Shock and Croson Grip. And
yeah, I mean, and that also just plays around things like Electrolyze and that kind of thing.
Well, I mean, here he wanted to attack with Ornithopter, so he just gets in an extra point of damage.
He did it last turn, too.
Right.
But, yeah. When you can deal extra damage, clearly that's what you want to do.
All right, so Dickmann's taking a look. We get a very close-up of that steam vents.
I think he's got to decide whether to play it tapped or not. Is that what's going on?
I think so.
Untapped lets him Cryptic Command.
He's going to attack here.
Which is the land under the steam
That's a
vents?
Hinterland Harbor.
So he doesn't have 3 blue?
He does. It's blue-green.
Oh, Hinterland Harbor. Yeah.
So how big is Scavenging Ooze right here? I can't quite see the
It's
die.
a 2/2.
Oh, okay. I mean, there's a relatively, I guess
He could
it's not
eat the
too
Overseer.
He can eat the Overseer if he wants, gain a life, grow it a little bit.
And leave up Exarch. But if he wants to play land tapped, then he doesn't leave up Exarch.
I guess the reason you don't instantly double block here is because you don't want to get blown out by a burn spell.
All right, there it is.
All right, he's going to pay the 2.
Steam Vents untapped.
That telegraphing Cryptic Command pretty voraciously.
Okay, he's going to play it here on his turn. He's going to bounce Steel Overseer and draw a card.
Wow.
And
interesting line.
That makes a lot of sense because, I mean, the attack here from the Signal Pest, Memnite, and what's that, Ornithopter, it's a big attack, but he is delaying Steel Overseer's ability to grow all of these creatures by 2 full turns. A turn to cast it and a turn to activate it again. And if he casts it and he just drew that line, oh, wow.
Yeah, so he found Cranial Plating. He's going to cast it and equip it to the Ornithopter, attack with the Signal Pest and the Ornithopter. So what are we looking at here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 artifacts. So that's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
12, 13. I think it's 13. Is it 2? So there's 3 from Signal Pest plus 1 damage. That's 4.
Why is it 3 from Signal Pest?
Oh, sorry, it's 2 from Signal Pest. This game is very hard.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're doing it very quickly, right? I mean, if you're sitting right next to the players, you can get it. But, I mean, he's going to be at 2 or 1 or something here after this attack. So, yeah, there it is.
Okay,
so 2 damage.
Yeah,
and this is a...
That Cryptic Command did not work out.
It did
Cranial
not
Plating.
work
I mean, the thing, he knew his opponent was pinched on land, so he thought that replaying the Steel Overseer would actually require tapping a creature with a drum. That land off the top there was gigantic for Christian.
Yeah, it's such a bad spot for Patrick there, because if he doesn't do it, and Christian Seibold can just be like, sure, activate my Overseer, attack with my guys. Like, he doesn't have to do anything there. He already had a board state that Dickmann was going to lose to in a couple of turns anyway, so tough spot. He has Remand. He also has a Pestermite in his hand.
Yeah.
So we talked about this earlier. He does have
the whole
this
tap
opportunity.
The plating, the line of tapping the plating creature doesn't really work when you're at 2.
Yeah.
Because the other creatures are bad enough.
That's right.
Now, Pestermite does fly, so it can block the Ornithopter, but Ornithopter as a 2/3 actually survives Pestermite. And it's right now holding the plating, so it's probably going to get tapped, but now Pestermite can block and trade with Signal Pest, which normally cannot be blocked by non-flyers.
That's right. Okay.
Dickmann's still alive. He's alive, but he's going to have to do some work.
Yeah, Signal Pest, Pestermite probably does have to block here.
Now, if Pestermite saves him this turn, though,
he can also gain a couple life off the Scavenging Ooze if those 2 creatures die.
It must die in order to do that, right?
Right.
Yes.
So he's not going to have the chance to just untap and go, whoop, I drew a Splinter Twin, gotcha.
Right. Now, next turn, he is able to set up Deceiver Exarch, tapping whatever creature has a Cranial Plate again.
Okay.
And then
blocking something else. Wow.
Exactly.
So this is going to be incredibly close.
He can also block the Memnite with Snapcaster.
Right.
Or a Scavenging Ooze that grows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, so here's Pestermite.
Yeah, so that plating was not part of Patrick Dickmann's plan, but he might be okay.
Now, Seibold has 1 Galvanic Blast in his deck that could just put it away right here.
Only the 1, though. A lot of
Only
these
1.
affinity lists play more than that.
Right. And it does have the mana to cast it, although not if he loses all of his creatures.
Yeah, so Seibold's not going to attack Memnite into Scavenging Ooze, but he is willing to trade Signal Pest for Pestermite.
Right, and he does just that.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Seibold's happy to trade those 2 creatures off against each other. Dickmann has to.
Right.
Because of the life total.
All right, and he's going to commit Steel Overseer, but that's going to get remanded here.
Yeah, gets to draw a card.
Wow,
and
that is
slow down a
huge.
creature.
All right, he finds his Serum Visions. But thanks to the Springleaf Drum and the newly played Inkmoth Nexus, he does get to replay Steel Overseer here.
That is
Seibold's now out of cards.
That is a big deal, though, because that means he's not able to re-equip the plating on this turn. He doesn't want the plating to be on Ornithopter, because Ornithopter is already lethal.
I see.
Not with Scavenging Ooze.
Oh, sorry. Right. That's a good point. Scavenging Ooze can take it out of burn range if he's able to have
there's
green
two.
mana.
There should be 3 right now in there too. So
there's a Signal Pest, a Steel Overseer,
and then there should be a Pestermite down there
That's
too.
a good
Yeah.
point.
So we're talking about potentially 3 life, though he actually only has 2 green mana sources available currently. So.
And with Steel Overseer active, it's 3, so it forces him to actually leave both green mana open in order to gain enough life for that to be relevant. Still threatening lethal next turn. But yeah, I mean, just a really problematic place for Patrick, but still well within reach. I mean, anytime he can draw and untap with a Splinter Twin, that's game.
Yep. Ugh, this is so close.
Yeah. This game is all about Patrick Dickmann trying to find a Splinter Twin.
Right. Is he lining up an attack here?
Really?
Well, I think he drew another Cryptic.
He would have to have
command.
a Cryptic if he's attacking.
Even that can be tricky with a black source, because if he taps all of Seibold's creatures with Cryptic Command, he's also got to bounce the Inkmoth Nexus. Or Inkmoth can just activate and re-equip a Cranial Plating.
But that's true anyway.
Is it lethal, though?
With the Cranial Plating, it is.
Yeah,
is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7?
8,
9?
So
it would be 9, right?
It would be 9, yeah.
So with any artifact off the top for Seibold, then it would be. This is really close. All right, Scavenging Ooze attacks, and it looks like that's not what his plan is here.
Things are happening.
Correct.
So it looks like the Ooze actually able to get in a successful attack for Seibold, or against Seibold. Still a long way to go if he's going to win the fairway.
Well, if he's going to be summoning Exarch to tap Ornithopter, then he's got 2 ground blockers anyway. Doesn't really need the Scavenging Ooze to block with.
Good point. Wow. I think that was another plating.
Was it?
Huh.
And there it is. Rich Hagan was talking about this at the news desk. There's a lot of finger tapping that goes on in this matchup, and there it is.
Man. The question, I guess, is what you target with it.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Or maybe not.
Activate Inkmoth Nexus.
And not enough mana
Dickmann
for
says,
Cryptic.
sure. No, he used his Scavenging Ooze before, so that's not the plan here.
Ornithopter hits for 2 here.
Potentially 3 if Steel Overseer gets activated.
Ah, right.
Interestingly, Steel
now he
Overseer can
can't-
attack too. It's like he's got a lot of options
And he
here.
can't do Exarch and gain a life off of Ooze.
And again, Inkmoth is lethal if it connects because of that Overseer activation. There's 9 artifacts, but 10 damage with the Overseer. Or no, sorry,
There's
8
not 9.
artifacts.
I don't
my
think
fault.
nine.
There's not
no,
nine.
no,
There
I'm
should
wrong.
Oh,
be
he has a
one short.
Pestermite.
All right, so here's the Pestermite
Wow.
from Patrick.
The fact that he has a flyer is huge here.
He's going to tap down the Ornithopter, which, like you mentioned, is
that's why he
potentially
can
lethal.
trade with the Nexus.
And he can trade with the Nexus, and it looks like Seibold, again, is going to... Well, does he actually force him to trade here? No, right?
He doesn't have to. He can go to 1 poison. That makes life really hard for Dickmann in the later turns, though, because that means he just can't ever be open to a single Inkmoth Nexus attack at any point in the game.
I'm just wondering if it's getting to the point where Patrick's outs become going off.
Sure.
Right? You know, I just, like, if he just keeps drawing sort of normal cards for the matchup, it feels like he's falling further and further behind
Yeah,
here.
he's just stalling to draw a twin.
Right. And he gets to Cryptic Command next turn, so he's got
Okay.
at least 1 turn to
Right,
avoid
so he can
worrying
draw a
about
twin,
this.
but, you know, if he loses his Pestermite in the process, the twin itself isn't going to
Yeah, well, I mean, he's got Exarch in his hand. He does. What he was hoping to do there was to be able to summon an Exarch which could block and survive. Like, he would love to get a creature into play and have it survive a turn. The problem was when they're lethal flyers, you kind of need the Pestermite to get in the way and get involved in combat.
And the affinity deck, the robots deck there, does produce a lot of flyers.
Yeah, so Ornithopter can hit for 3, and plus the Overseer activation is 4. He can gain 2 life. Are there 2 creatures left in yards?
Well, he just tapped one of his
Signal
green mana
Pest
sources and
Snapcast.
played
There's
a
at least
Tarmogoyf.
2.
And played a Tarmogoyf here.
Yep.
So I guess he's relying upon tapping the Ornithopter.
Yeah, he's going to tap the Ornithopter, and then he's got ground blockers. Okay. Right. So as long as there's only with the one flyer, that can be the one he taps with Exarch.
Which, again, is another really important reason to be able to get that Nexus away, because you don't have to worry about...
Right.
Yes.
That's why you trade with Pestermite.
Incidentally, robbing him of mana.
Right. Yeah, a good point, too. That Springleaf Drum gives him 3, but it means he's got to actually tap creatures there.
Speaking of mana, he draws an island here. He still has that second plating in hand.
The island, the single basic land in the Affinity deck.
Is that the one?
Yeah, it's the one. Usually there to fetch with Path to Exile for the multiple copies of Thoughtcast. You have 4 copies of Thoughtcast in the deck. So now we wait. Seibold falling down to 10. Yeah, now we count, exactly. Yeah. Seibold in real danger of just dying if he taps out. Yeah, Tarmogoyf 5.
I mean, that's 8 power and toughness on the other side of the table here, or 8 power, I should say.
Yeah, and
Are there
2
two
creatures in
left?
the graveyard. Snapcaster
He's got 10 power?
He's got 10
well,
power.
He only has 1 green mana source right now, but if he does want to commit, he can do it.
Wow.
Yeah. If he eats
insane.
a creature at the end of this turn,
also Exarch
Cryptix.
has a power. Well, he's going to have to Exarch.
Wow.
He's going to have to Exarch, and yeah, I mean, Seibold can force him to block a platinged up dude.
Magic is extremely hard, is what I'm learning from this game.
Confirmed.
Exactsies in multiple ways. And now Seibold, yeah, trying to figure out like how he can force Dickmann to commit to something without, just dying to the onboard board state.
Yeah, I mean, Seibold's worried about Ooze gaining life and Ornithopter being legal, and turns out that's not what's going on.
Wow.
All right,
another
Deceiver Exarch for Patrick Dickmann. He says it with almost question in his hand, but he knows it's going to resolve, and there it is. Ornithopter being tapped down.
Yeah, and you just pass. Yeah, you've got to have blockers now. And I mean, that Midnight could just kill the Tarmogoyf. So,
yeah, but no, he could also block the Exarch, and then he cracks back for lethal. That's the fear. Yeah, Seibold's playing defense.
Right, yeah, you're right. That's what I mean, is that the
Seibold is afraid of losing to 10 damage from the Ooze and the Tarmogoyf.
And it's going to start getting there pretty quickly. I think that was a Flame Slash off the top there for Patrick.
Yeah,
he can take out Steel Overseer with that.
He's been stalling for Twin. Is he really going to win with Ooze and Tarmogoyf?
Is he just beating down with that Ooze and going to win?
I think he's just going to Cryptic Command, tap Dickmann's creatures, or tap Seibold's creatures, and just attack for the win here.
That's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And then activate
Ooze. With his Forest.
Done. That's 10.
Unbelievable. Because like you're thinking when you're Seibold, oh, my
Patrick just asked, he said, you're at 10 life?
You're at 10 life? I have 5 plus 3 plus 1 plus... Yeah, one Ooze activation gets him to 10 power.
Unbelievable.
No cards in hand for Seibold, so Patrick Dickmann has perfect info here.
Wow.
And he even gets a card off of it.
Yeah, I mean...
Tapping, obviously, Steel Overseer.
But yeah, this is...
There it is.
Wow.
Who needs Splinter Twin?
Wow.
Unreal.
He's going to eat a Snapcaster Mage and attack for lethal here. He left 1 creature in the yard so his Goyf didn't get smaller. And that's it. Wow.
The amount of work that Scavenging Ooze did in this game is unbelievable. Scavenging Ooze presenting lethal damage and just keeping him alive. Wow.
Wow, that's incredible. I have to say that is not how I thought that game would play out going long. It seemed like he was a lot more desperate to get that Splinter Twin going or something after what was really a great start there for Christian Seibold. I mean, that was pretty ideal for him, right? I mean, he had the plating.
Yes.
He even had double Overseer with a bunch of creatures. Like, what more could you really ask for from his seat?
You could ask for an opponent easier than Patrick Dickmann. Yeah. I'm not sure there's anybody in this building that knows more about Modern than Patrick Dickmann. Mm-hmm. There are 3 Patrick Dickmann decks in this top 8.
Is that right?
Unreal.
Yeah. He's playing his deck. The Affinity deck that he's playing against this quarterfinals is a teammate that he handed the Affinity list he had available as a potential audible. And if you think about it, the other Blue-Red Twin deck is basically his Antwerp version of the tech. That was last year's tech. And, I mean, to be fair, Alkio has modified it to fit in this metagame, but he basically admits he took Dickmann's Antwerp winning list and tweaked it. Yeah, Patrick Dickmann's got 3 decks in this top 8. He's insane.
Yeah, that is insane, and that was masterfully played as well. I know he has more experience with this list than anybody else. It's his baby. You know, he made this thing. He's grounded.
He's played, you know, hundreds of hours of Magic Online with the Splinter Twin deck, with sort of every version of it, and he's been planning for months. Yeah, I've been meaning to try out a version with Tarmogoyfs. Figured, you know, I'd wait for the Pro Tour. You know, so he did.
That's insane.
So impressive.
And that game was razor thin as well.
I mean, we're sitting there wondering, like, how does he play defense?
Every turn was like, how does he even stay alive? And then he wasn't interested in staying alive. He was interested in winning.
Right. All right, why don't we take a look at our sideboard options here? The players, again, this is best 2 out of 3 here in the quarters. And what that means is, let's take a look at Patrick Dickmann's sideboard, is that there's going to be 1 or 2 sideboarded games here. As sometimes we get accustomed to the full 5 here. Let's take a look at it.
Ancient Grudge. 2 words. Ancient Grudge. Nature's Claim, also 2 words. Those are the cards that are going to come in here. You have the ability to blow up artifacts, and just, if you wipe out the Affinity deck's creatures, I mean, any matchup, Affinity is going to get worse after sideboarding. Like, the Affinity deck is not well set up to sideboard, and basically everybody in the format knows that's one of the cornerstone decks. It's in everybody's top 5 gauntlet. Everybody knows you have to be able to deal with Affinity after sideboarding. And yeah, Dickmann is 2 Ancient Grudge, 1 Nature's Claim. I don't know how much else will come in, but those are the keys.
Well, there's Engineered Explosives.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's interesting, right? I mean, you can even play it for nothing. What about Anger of the Gods?
I don't think Anger works well in this matchup. Maybe it does.
Okay.
I mean, it's tricky because the Affinity deck, you know, sometimes it goes large with Ravagers. Anger could be good, though.
Yeah, I mean, it has turns where you just flood the board with small creatures. In those cases, Anger is amazing. There's also games, though, where they win with Cranial Plating or Artbound Ravager on a Nexus. In that case, Anger is blank.
Exactly. Now, how many cards he takes out is, I think, the question. Electrolyze is good. Flame Slash seems good. Bolt, sure. He's got Serum Vision's Gataxian Probe for life gaining. I don't know if Probe is worth it here. Paying the 2 life is going to sting.
You're going to see an empty hand.
And Cryptic Command might actually be too slow for this matchup. It's not like you need to counterspell things.
No, but the fog aspect of it's
But do you really want a 4-mana fog in your deck? Even a cantrip fog? I don't know. I'd rather. I mean, it's no Ancient Grudge. I mean, obviously, you're bringing in 3 artifacts.
Yeah, I don't think that those are going to be pitted against each other on the decision tree there for Patrick, though. I think that Ancient Grudge is in no matter what. What about Batterskull?
Batterskull's decent.
You know, it gives you some game a little. Yeah, turn 5. He is on the draw this game as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super excited about Scavenging Ooze. Not that much is hitting the graveyard, especially if you're playing as Anger of the Gods. And, you know, which literally exiles things. I see where both of you are coming from about Cryptic. Like, being able to have a turn is amazing. On the other end, 4 mana is a whole lot.
I'm boarding out Cryptic. You're probably right about. I'm boarding out Ooze if I like Anger in the matchup.
I'm in on Cryptic because I'm playing him.
All right.
Yeah, so
see how this goes.
So we have a play test session later.
I think you take out Remand. Like, Remand really good against.
That's a good point.
Like Remand on free cards.
Yeah,
4 Remands are out. That's a good point. Maybe you could get room for a couple of Cryptics after you take the Remands.
Okay.
I think you stay a combo deck, though, right? I think you basically preserve both strategies. You've got Tarmogoyfs, you've got the whole combo. It's just a question around the edges. Permission is pretty bad in the matchup. You want to be able to aggressively blow things up. Like, let them resolve and then blow them up.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that Ancient Grudge, Nature's Claim, Anger of the Gods, Engineer Explosives, Batterskull are all very, very good here. Now, if you have enough slots to bring those in, then I think you probably would.
Do you spell Skite in order to... You can't steal a Cranial Plating, right? Or can you?
No, because you can't equip to something that's not yours, so it's not a legal target.
Right.
Yeah.
I like Dismember also.
Yeah.
Do you? Now remember, he doesn't have access to black mana here, too.
It's a lot of life. I mean, yeah, it's a lot. I think the biggest threats actually come from Nexuses.
But
it might be you have enough with Claim Grudge. It's hard to say.
All right, let's take a look at Christian Seibold's side of the board here. Now, this is a much different look. Zach, walk us through this.
Yeah, so, I mean, sideboarding with Affinity in many ways is a nightmare. Because if you dilute your main deck way too much, then you're all of a sudden not playing Magic. You know, your combo pieces need to all fit together. Cards that you're interested in, I think, include Galvanic Blast. It kills all those 4 toughness creatures, kills these Tarmogoyfs. You're absolutely interested in Thoughtseize, and I think Etched Champion is incredibly important. We were just talking about how you board in all these removal spells, and your opponent has all these huge blockers. Etched Champion doesn't care about any of that. Now, the downside is it's a 3-mana 2/2, and you already have 3 in your main deck, so I don't know if you need to go up to 4. It gets really challenging. I think cards that you cut, Thoughtcast to me is not exciting. This is not an attrition matchup. It's 1 mana, draw 2 cards, so it's hard to say, oh, I don't want to be playing that. But your opponent can kill you on a moment's notice. You don't have a lot of time to sitting around doing things. It's a blue spell. You only have, you don't have that many blue sources. I think you have 9 blue sources. Maybe, I know you have 12 with Glimmer Void. But, still not a ton, and it can slow you down. And if you're bringing in Thoughtseize and Galvanic Blast, you want to minimize the amount of non-artifact spells in your deck. So I think I'd cut the 1 Master of Ethereum, not really awesome against all of the tappers, and the 4 copies of Thoughtcast for 1 Galvanic Blast, 2 Thoughtseize, Etched Champion, and Spell Pierce.
Now, what do you think about Blood Moon?
I was going to say, as the Dickmann representative
Oh,
over here, I'm delighted if you leave Blood Moon in your sideboard. I have 4 basics in my deck, and that's it.
Blood Moon might be better than, for example, the Spell Pierce. My thought was, oh, okay, it actually fixes you for double red. You're going to have blue. You're taking out Cryptic Command maybe anyway, but you're right. With only 4 basics and fetching them up is probably highly problematic. You probably bring in Blood Moon and just get a free win.
All right, so get a reasonable idea of what we might be working with here as far as sideboards. As we go
I think however the details work out, I think Dickmann gets better. Like wherever you thought the match win percentage was previously, it moves in Dickmann's favor after sideboarding. Nothing that Seibold has compares to 2 Ancient Grudges.
But yeah, and one of the downsides of Affinity is that frequently your game 1 is so good because you're just so linear.
Right.
But after board, it's not just that other people get Ancient Grudges, it's that boarding for your deck is really hard.
Right.
Like we've seen
Because you're diluting it.
Yeah.
Whatever you do dilutes your thing that you're actually good at.
Exactly.
So you have a lot less flexibility as an Affinity player as far as going for the sideboard.
Precisely, yeah.
Okay,
And when you lose game 1, that's really bad news.
Yeah, for sure. And that was a super, super close game 1 here. We're in the 4th quarterfinal match, so our full semifinals will be set after this match is finished. Right now, we have 2 German players going at it. We've already got 2 Canadians move through.
And a Finn.
And a Finn, right. So this is going to be...
Yeah, it will be Canada versus Europe, one way or the other.
It will indeed. So this one's best 2 out of 3, remember. We've made a few changes here, and it'll be like that going through. So, yeah, this is going to be great. Players right now are presenting decks, and they're going to be resolving mulligans, and we'll get you right back down to the feature match area as soon as possible. Prediction?
I think it's... I mean, I'm Seibold's rep here. I think it's probably going to be Patrick.
Thoughts?
Before the top 8 started, before I even looked at the brackets, Patrick Dickmann was my pick.
Okay.
I think he's the best player in this top 8. I think this format is just everything that he loves and is good at about Magic.
Yeah, he is a Modern specialist. You know, Modern has been around long enough now that we have Modern specialists, like people that are absolutely dialed in and focused on Modern as their format. And we've seen quite a few of them do really, really well at this tournament. We saw Sam Pardee as well. He's kind of got that same vibe going where he's really, really put a lot of effort into Modern, and it's paid off for him in a
Sam
big
played
way.
2 different win and in matches for top 8. Lost both of them, which was kind of heartbreaking, but he did have a deck in this top 8. Jacob Wilson is playing the same list. They were teammates, and Wilson decided, he called it Party Pod.
Party Pod?
Party Pod.
I like that a lot. Yeah, it does. And I mean, in general here, right, Patrick Dickmann's deck has improved, right? I mean, those ancient grudges and those type of things have really made the matchup perhaps a bit better for him, and he even scraped out a victory in that first game. All right, looks like Christian Seibold is deep in the tank here, trying to figure out if he wants to keep this hand.
Well, he did mulligan
to
He did mulligan to 6 game 1. And we saw him not really coming out fast enough. Mulliganing with Affinity is really hard because, again, you need all the pieces to come together.
Yeah, and a lot of them rely on each other when on the battlefield. You know, Springleaf Drum without a creature doesn't do anything. There's a lot of things like that. But it looks like Christian Seibold's going to make the disciplined play here, and he's going to go down to 6 cards. So why don't we take a look at, I want to see Cranial Plating. This is one that was kind of the boogeyman some amount of years ago when it was in Standard, and it has found
Was the boogeyman?
Wasn't it?
Was it ever not the boogeyman?
I mean, I'm just saying, like that was its heyday, and now, it's found a nice home in Modern to be kind of a mini boogeyman. And it really is going to be the target, though, right? Isn't that one of the key cards that they're going to need that Patrick's going to need to hit with his Ancient Grudges?
Oh, yeah. I think Cranial Plating is one of the most powerful cards in Modern.
Okay.
I mean, if you were to look, you look at the best decks, that is the best card in one of the best decks in the format.
Well, and I mean,
Splinter Twin on the other side is also on that list. But
like Randy and I have both been in Magic the Gathering R&D. If you were like, cost this card, target creature gets the equipment, gets +8/+0.
Right.
Would your numbers be 2 and then 1?
I don't think
and
so.
colorless. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, in case that wasn't mind-wrenchingly insane enough for you, if you have 2 black, you can attach it at instant speed. So that means none of this tapping of creatures, removal spell, that's not going to do anything. I mean, this card is an unbelievable Magic card.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I remember I was in some of the conversations around Mirrodin development back when this card first got printed, and there was the Nim ability. There were a bunch of black creatures in that format. There were creatures that had plus power for all the artifacts in play, and they were all terrible. Like you go back, they didn't even get played in limited. They were like last pick limited cards. We're like, yeah, and so. When we were looking for an ability for sort of the black member of this cycle, there's actually a cycle of these equipment that move at instant speed. It was like, well, why don't we try out the Nim ability? It's not that good, right? Turns out, if you put it on equipment, it is that good.
All right, let's take a look at Etched Champion here. This is a card we didn't see in the first game, but it's really kind of come into its own here in Modern as well as being the de facto, well, I mean, this is actually the high drop for the deck. This is the biggest thing it plays is the 3. But talk to us a little about Etched Champion.
Well, yeah, and it's actually such a high drop that you don't play 4 copies, and it prevents you from playing some number of Master of Ethereum, which is also good. Etched Champion basically always has protection from all colors. Kind of a cute little synergy when you have a bunch of artifacts. It has protection from colors. But all of what we saw last game about things getting tapped by Deceiver X arts, stuff getting bolted, Anger of the Gods after board, Ancient Grudge, none of that does anything against Etched Champion.
Right.
Now, if what you're doing is attacking for 2, not all that exciting. But if you could put some Arcbound Ravager counters, some Steel Overseer counters, or a Cranial Plate on Etched Champion, suddenly the game's going to be over very fast.
Yeah, it has become in many ways the finisher for the deck, right? I mean, it's not necessarily that you played on curve and it's amazing, but it kind of ends up being that last thing where even if they've Ancient Grudged away a bunch of your stuff, it's still sitting there, and often because of lands, it's still active. All right, players are ready. Let's head back down to the feature match area for Game 2 of the last quarterfinal match here from Pro Tour Born of the Gods. Take a look at the big picture. We've got all of our coverage team down there surrounding the 2 players in the feature match area. And here's a Vault Scourge to kick things off for Christian Seibold. And not bad. I mean, he's got to get the ball rolling somehow here. Ideally on turn 2, he just dumps the contents of his hand onto the table, but it's not always that simple. And it looks like Dickmann kept a 3-lander with a Bolt, 2 Splinter Twins, and a Mage, but just drew an Ancient Grudge.
Now, something that I missed completely when we were going through sideboarding is Torpor Orb, a card that totally neutralizes the Splinter Twin combo while being an artifact to help out with all of your artifact synergies.
Interesting. Does he have one here?
He has one in his hand. Normally really, really effective against the Birthing Pod decks. Also really good against Deceiver X Arc. When that card, and Pestermite, when they don't have an ETB ability, that means they can't untap anything. They can't do anything. And the Splinter Twin and Kiki Jiki combos, okay, you tap them, you get a 1/4, and that's it.
Yeah, so, we should see if we can put up Torpor Orb for people who haven't seen it before. It basically says creatures with enter the battlefield effects. Don't do anything.
It doesn't happen. That's right.
I'm not sure that's the precise template, but that's the gist of it.
All right, so here's Lightning Bolt that is going to take down a Vault Scourge here. And there's a follow-up play here for Christian Seibold, and it's really one of his most powerful plays. It's a Cranial Plating, but it's not long for this world. Patrick has no real incentive to destroy it now, but once Christian Seibold commits to an equip somewhere, he can do that.
Well, and it is, again, one of those cards. It buys you time, but a lot of people sort of think that, like, oh, okay, I'm going to play a Torpor Orb now, opponent can't win. Your opponent's plan post-board is to blow up artifacts.
Yes.
So what Torpor Orb does is buy you some time while they have
to... an Ancient Grudge.
Exactly. They have to sit around figuring out how to kill it in order to kill you.
Yeah, they do have to find it.
Right.
But then, yeah, it's not like your opponent is going to be cold to this card, but it's going to force them to answer it.
All right, here's Inkmoth Nexus being activated. Glimmer Void played, tapped, and used to activate the equip ability there of Cranial Plating. And assumption here is that Cranial Plating is going to be in the graveyard very shortly here. So we're going to see Cranial Plating down and an Inkmoth Nexus live, though. Inkmoth Nexus is not an artifact.
Inkmoth Nexus activates, right? Right. Not by default an artifact.
Right.
So, you know, it's going to be able to produce mana unless Seibold makes it vulnerable. Still a decent amount of infect damage coming through with that Inkmoth Nexus.
All right, and there it goes. Cranial Plating down.
So we've seen Vault Scourge and Cranial Plating down. Where Torpor Orb still in his hand. Not, you know, you want to apply pressure before you run the orb out, and that's what he was doing with that play.
That's right. So Dickmann takes a poison counter, no problem. He doesn't need to worry about Inkmoth Nexus until it becomes lethal down the line, so he can just happily leave that Ancient Grudge sitting there. There's a memory jar.
Welding jar.
Excuse me, welding jar.
Memory jar would be quite a different
I think that would be pretty sweet here, actually.
I think it would be on the banned list if it was legal in this format.
All right, and there's a Torpor Orb as well for Christian Seibold. He has a... Let's take a look at Seibold's hand here.
Seibold's got a Springleaf Drum and a Cranial Plate. Not a whole lot to do with the Springleaf Drum, given that he has to activate Inkmoth just to have a creature. But Welding Jar plus Cranial Plate could be extremely powerful here, as you know, Cranial Plate would stick potentially, and Inkmoth Nexus is not going to die in response. That said, with Ancient Grudge in the graveyard, you just can't get too excited about any individual artifact. The only real benefit, I guess, to having Cranial Plate get destroyed is it means your Torpor Orb is sitting there on the battlefield.
All right, and here's Lightning Bolt.
This is happening in response to the Torpor Orb so that Snapcaster Mage actually accomplishes something.
Okay. And what it accomplished was bringing Christian Seibold from 18 to 15. So it actually just went right to his face there. And it also leaves up a bit of pressure. You know, Christian seems to have all of his, I mean, like you mentioned a minute ago, Zach, there's no creatures here, right? I mean, he has an Inkmoth Nexus, but there's an Ancient Grudge already in the yard, and here we go. Zach, you mentioned this play in the last matchup, and here it is again. Splinter Twin for value. It's going to go on Snapcaster Mage.
Just to make it 2-1 to attack with?
Yeah, it's just going to attack here.
Yeah, I think it's to set up future turns. He's got another Splinter Twin in his hand. He knows that the Affinity deck, not really full of disruption. Splinter Twin, vulnerable to Thoughtseize. I don't think that's the primary consideration. I think this is to set up things like Flame Slash. If he's able to Ancient Grudge the Torpor Orb, you know, it's just he's not going to really get around to casting two of them, and he's not probably going to get interfered with too much. So
Ancient Grudging the Torpor Orb doesn't work through Welding Jar, though. Welding Jar will just regenerate it.
No, that's true.
All right,
the Ancient Grudge is probably just trading with a
Welding Jar. Yeah, the Welding Jar was actually a really important draw here.
It was. Now, Inkmoth Nexus activated, gets in there. He also plays out the Cranial Plating, so it is sitting there, looking ominous as it does.
And again.
And Welding Jar also can defend that. I mean, that Welding Jar is doing a lot of good work on this board.
And the Flame Slash in Dickmann's hand, you know, a lot of the time bolts are in that slot or other burn spells. Flame Slash does 4, which gets rid of Spellskite and other Deceiver Exarchs, but not an instant, so can't really do a whole lot against those Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah, the Inkmoth Nexus do a lot of work in the Affinity deck in general. Definitely part of the power of the deck. Flame Slash has been really bad this game.
Yeah, I mean, Dickmann really not in great shape right here.
Yeah.
All right, there's a Scavenging Ooze for Patrick now, so he's keeping the pressure going. Christian Seibold's down to 11 here. Patrick has 2 poison counters right now, but there are 2 Inkmoth Nexus on the table, plus a Cranial Plating.
So he can activate 2 Inkmoth Nexus. That's 2 artifacts, 3 with Darksteel, with Darksteel Citadel, 4, 5, 6. So, I mean, represents a lot of infect damage.
All right.
And then the 2 points from the Inkmoth, I mean, that's 8, isn't it? If he's able to equip?
if he's able to equip, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah.
Yeah, because Springleaf Drum and Mox out there producing mana. Yeah, I mean, this is a lethal attack
Is this
step.
actually just lethal here?
I think so.
Is it Xaxes? Because Ancient Grudge can trade for Welding Jar.
I think that's actually what the issue is.
So does he hit the...
Doesn't matter what he hits, it's going to get Welding Jarred.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He can try to hit plating, but yeah. So that's actually 9. So I think it's 1 more than exact damage, even if it were to resolve.
And by damage, you mean poison.
Poison. Yeah. Infect damage.
It's got to point this at plating, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think so. You have to make your opponent use the jar. He's what? Right,
regenerating the big Nexus
No,
would
you're
remove it
absolutely
from combat.
right. Yeah, it's strictly better to target the Nexus to get an
But why
extra
did it
turn.
die?
Because he chose not to
He chose not to
Okay, he
regenerate
just said
because
sure.
he's got another one.
He's got another one. He's defending the Torpor Orb,
Exactly.
which prevents Dickmann from just untapping and winning the game.
Right. So a big sacrifice for Dickmann to use it on the Nexus because that means he doesn't deal with Cranial Plate or with Torpor Orb.
Exactly.
But it does buy him another turn as opposed to straight up just dying.
Yes.
So I mean, Welding Jar has just defined this game. Right. Welding Jar has been the card. Scavenging is doing its thing.
There's 5 damage.
And another Splinter Twin, Batterskull, Flame Slash, no targets for it.
Yeah.
Not worth
Yeah, if that was a
casting
Lightning
Batterskull.
Bolt, this game would be a lot easier.
Yeah.
Is this plating just lethal?
I think so. Because, yeah, he has an additional poison. And now one of the artifacts gone. Welding Jar's still there, though. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 artifacts if Inkmoth Nexus gets activated.
Right.
Plus 1 point of power. So that's actually an 8 power of infect damage.
Which is plenty.
Yeah.
And it's still 7 even if the jar's gone.
It's funny, there's a deck called Infect in Modern that's a fine deck, but a lot of times Affinity is your Infect deck.
Patrick hasn't drawn anything relevant. Batterskull came in, doesn't really help here. Flame Slash does not help here because it's a sorcery.
Right. And the redundant Splinter Twin just accomplishing basically nothing. I think
because of Torpor Orb.
Exactly. I think according to our floor reporter,
although I guess with this draw,
it wouldn't do anything.
It wouldn't do anything anyway. Yeah. But I think actually Dickmann sided out some number of Splinter Twins. I think he with the additional
he pulled
disruption,
2 of them. Yeah.
Pulled 2,
so he's drawn all the Splinter Twins in his library. I think he knew they're not spectacular in this matchup.
Right.
If he can blow up all the artifacts, he can just attack with Tarmogoyf. So he wants the ability to combo, but that's not plan A.
Right. And he left in Scavenging Ooze, I guess, again, assuming that enough things are
Well,
dying.
plan A is to attack with, Tarmogoyfs.
You might as well have...
Ooze is almost as good.
Right.
Yeah, Batterskull helps that beatdown plan.
So you see, Seibold could theoretically cast Steel Overseer to get more artifacts on the battlefield, but I think he wants to just activate and suit up with Cranial Plating. And
just
say,
go for it here.
Yeah, I mean, he's imagining cards that might be in Dickmann's hand and trying to figure out.
He's got 2 black mana, so he can equip at instant speed if he needs to.
Did you see him touch his land? Dickmann was bluffing a Lightning Bolt there, trying to see if he could convince Seibold not to go for it.
Right.
And
that was a nice subtle
do it
play.
for game 2 there.
I think that play gets around Cryptic Command because they have to, well, it doesn't get around bouncing it. It gets around tapping it. But
that's right.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to get another game 3 here in our last quarterfinal match. This is a very... Seibold shakes his head and kind of gives us a sigh. These have been super, super close, both of the games, and I have no reason to expect that the third wouldn't be exactly the same, and I kind of hope it is. I like these nail biters.
It's interesting to see Dickmann, who's primarily a Magic Online player, making the sort of tabletop play of, reaching for his land like he's going to tap it. Because he was trying to, the only play he has is somehow he needs Seibold to just not equip Cranial Plating. That's the only way he can possibly get another turn. And so he had, trying to play a little bit of a mental game there. That was kind of cool.
Every time my opponent does that, I know they don't have it. Every time they do that, I'm like, nope, we're in.
Sure. Yeah, no, I mean, it is a bluff, and some people are better at bluffing than others.
It's true. But no, I agree with you. I think that that's pretty cool. He did that, especially because he has nothing else. I mean, it's like he's got to divide. All right, so we've got a slide for you. We can take a look at Inkmoth Nexus, the big star of that last game there, dealing damage in the form of poison counters there to finish it up a lot quicker than it would be to do it through normal damage.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's amazing to me about Inkmoth Nexus, I really, you know, in the first game, we thought that Dickmann's draw was not that awesome, and he ended up winning. In the second game, the affinity draw was not that great. I mean, deployed basically no threats to the board. It was kind of playing lands, had some cranial plates, had a Torpor Orb that wasn't really doing a lot, although it threatened a lot. But Inkmoth Nexus was able to just turn the second plating into lethal within 2 turns. And the Flame Slash that Dickmann was holding to deal with this just accomplished nothing because Inkmoth not a creature on Philip's turn. So Inkmoth Nexus was just vital in that game.
Yeah, I think this is really one of the best reasons, though, to play a deck like Affinity, right? It gives you access to these utility lands that you just don't get out of other. Like if you go for 3 colors, all your lands have their job. They need to produce multiple colors of mana so you can just play your spells, and they're just happy to be able to even do that sometimes. But when you play a bunch of colorless spells, you get cards like Inkmoth Nexus that can just absolutely win you the game. It's like a big selling point for the Affinity deck.
Yeah, it's not the only man land in the deck either. I mean, the original was the Blinkmoth Nexus back from the original Mirrodin block, and that's also very good at picking up a cranial plating and attacking the opponent. I mean, this one deals normal damage rather than poison damage, but still, that's a lot of sort of extra resilience when your deck can just take its lands and kill the opponent by picking up a cranial plating.
I'm looking at Seibold's sideboard right now. It looks like he took out Signal Pest, so he's basically and Memnite. So he's basically saying, I'm not going to win by flooding the board. He probably knows about Anger of the Gods. Also knows that just like 1/4 creature is probably pretty good against that. So yeah, an interesting sideboard plan from Seibold.
So this is the Affinity deck going big.
Yeah, doing something. I mean, that gives it more room to bring in things like Etched Champion, bring in Torpor Orb, bring in Thoughtseize.
Is it just the one Torpor Orb, or there are multiples?
There's only one. There's one Blood Moon, so kind of 2 cards that you cast and just hope blank your opponent's deck.
Right.
But
we got a Torpor Orb slide?
I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, Torpor Orb is a card that we see pop up on sideboards in Modern sporadically. I mean, it hits some, the Birthing Pod deck, it does a good job against that for the most part, and it does it here. Why don't we take a quick look at Torpor Orb? It's kind of an interesting card. It's one that, well, creatures entering the battlefield don't cause abilities to trigger. Right. So, there's a whole class of creatures that are ETB, or enters the battlefield triggers, where when you play them, you get something, and this shuts that something off. You still get the creature, everything else is fine, but you just don't get that thing. And, we were talking about the Birthing Pod deck, for example. Well, the whole entire combo is based around an enters the battlefield trigger ability from a creature, and if you can turn that off, you can turn off the whole thing. Same thing with Splinter Twin, because, as you mentioned earlier, Zach, the Splinter Twin grants the ability to the creature itself. So.
Right. So, yeah, Torpor Orb, great sideboard card against 2 of the more popular Modern decks. The reason he's only playing 1, again, you can't have too many cards that are just reactive in a proactive.
The second one, not nearly as good as the first one. Yeah. Like when you draw 2, the second one is just blank. I mean, it's insurance, but it would much rather be a welding jar.
Right. And I thought that was interesting what you said earlier, Zach, as well, just about the fact that so, Randy, you said, look, Affinity, this deck is part of the gauntlet. If you're going to test seriously for Modern and you have no game against Affinity, you're doing it wrong.
Yep.
But then what you said, Zach, made a lot of sense too, which is that if that's the case, then people are going to have ways to destroy artifacts. And if your big sideboard plan is to play another artifact, that might not get the job done because, looking at it from Patrick Dickmann's side, if he decides it's time to go off, he can just use one of those artifact removal spells to take out the orb. Now,
as long as he doesn't have welding jars.
Yeah, there you go. So interesting stuff there
it's a nice
for sure
little dance.
when it comes to it. All right, it looks like one of the players is not. It looks like Dickmann has not changed his sideboard at all. He's decided to stick with the plan here. He knows what he wants to do against this deck. Again, we talked about it before. A deck like the Affinity deck, not that flexible.
Right. I did hear that he brought in a couple copies of Relic of Progenitus.
Oh, okay.
Again, good because it's an artifact. Also good because he saw Scavenging Ooze in the second game, meaning that it blanks Tarmogoyf and Ooze. Right. Now, if what we heard was that Dickmann's plan was actually to, remove some number of Splinter Twin to try to win the fairway, really hard to do through empty graveyards if your primary threats are Goyf and Ooze.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't realize that Memnite was just a card that came out in these matchups.
Yeah, I didn't either. I mean,
I didn't either. I thought it was just one of those must-haves.
Yeah, 2 Anger the Gods is probably scaring him significantly.
Yeah, for sure. That can be an absolute blowout here. And I do like Patrick Dickmann's sideboard plan here. He's got a lot of great stuff to bring in. He even has some flexibility within that, whether he's on the play or the draw, that kind of stuff. So I think we're going to see a real slugfest here in this last one as, Patrick, he's got the sideboard plan. He's got the game 1 win. Can he finish off in this third game?
Being on the play certainly helps.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think, and that may be one of the reasons that you see stuff like, okay, we're going to take out Signal Pass, we're going to take out Memnites, because on the draw, it's a lot harder to get one of those just totally bananas openings that your opponent can't deal with. Now, you might take it out anyway, but I think especially when you're on the draw, a lot of things have to go right for that to be able to win you the game, and I think you'd like a lot more of these sort of specialized cards. All
right, so players are taking a look at their opening 7s now, so we're going to bring you guys back down there very shortly for, well, it's going to be our last game here down in the feature match area for the quarterfinals. That will leave the semifinals completely set, in which case you and I and me and you, we're all going to walk over to the news desk, and we're going to be kind of handling it from there over here. We're going to bring in Brian David Marshall. We're going to bring in Rich Hagan. We're going to bring in Luis Scott Vargas to cover the semifinals and the finals as well. So it looks like Seibold is taking a mulligan, and Dickmann has kept his 7-card opener.
Seibold mulliganing all 3 games of this match. I mean, you've got to hate that happening. You just look at your opening 7, you're like, come on, can I get a break? But
yeah, I mean, how often, is the affinity deck a deck that mulligans often and is looking for specific pieces, or is it kind of the other side of the thing where it's like, yeah, these will work?
It's sort of interesting. On one hand, you can deal with landlight hands better than a lot of other decks. On the other hand, you've got these colorless lands, you've got spell, you got black, you got red, you got blue spells. You can hold Island Thoughtseize, kind of awkward, So, I mean, I think there are some reasons it mulligans more, some reasons it mulligans less. But I do know that you really don't want to mulligan with the deck because so many of the cards have synergies with each other. If you're in a 5-card hand, you're going to have to do a lot of work to turn on, not Chrome Mox, but Mox Opal.
Mox Opal, right, yeah. So it looks like Seibold is still just finishing up his shuffle here, but we're going to get you right back down there as soon as players are ready. Now, did I hear that Dickmann has a 1-lander here?
Yeah, he's also got 2 Serum Visions in it, so it seems okay.
So no problem.
Yeah. And this isn't a matchup where your first Serum Vision is going to get spell pierced or something. Although theoretically,
especially being on the play,
Seibold has 1 spell pierce.
He does, so right? Yeah.
Could maybe theoretically happen. I don't know. It looks like he sideboarded out a lot, so I guess we'll see.
You're rooting for it, Zach Hill?
Well, I mean, this is a Sunday that has been defined by random one-ofs out of the sideboard.
It has.
So, threads of disloyalty on a wall, just totally taking over a match. Torpor Orb we saw in last game doing work. I mean, you play the cards to draw them.
Right.
So
yeah, that's true. All right, so 6 cards for Christian Seibold. I'm keeping an eye on a side monitor here. That's why I keep looking over there. I'm going to see if he keeps that, because I know that you're excited to see them play, and we are as well. And we're going to have you down there once they're ready. Now, going down to 5 here, you mentioned it a second ago, Zach, pretty nasty for the affinity deck.
Almost nothing would get me to go down to 5 here. I mean, you've got a draw step because you're on the draw anyway. That can be a land. A lot of the times at Affinity, you can cast basically everything in your deck. Again, your expensive spells cost 3. So barring some kind of absurd hand with, all Etched champions and 0 lands.
You would mulligan all land, too.
I would definitely mulligan all land. That's absolutely true. Or like Glimmer Void, no artifacts.
Although an all-land hand in this deck is pretty threat-dense.
Yeah, that's true.
But it doesn't... You can't win the super long game.
Right.
I mean, you need a cranial plating with some artifacts in order for those man lands to be really threatening.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a decent point, but...
Yeah, so it looks like Christian Seibold has kept his hand, and once I get the all clear, we're going to head back down to the future. All right, we're ready to go. So let's head back down there for Game 3. Patrick Dickmann versus Christian Seibold. Okay, we're back down in the feature match area here.
Pink sleeves versus black sleeves.
That's
right. Clearly the matchup.
Are those? Is that Mogus?
I think that's our satyr friend Xenagos.
You're right. It is.
You can tell by the hair.
the party here. So Patrick, he's going to start off with a Scalding Tarn. Now, we mentioned that he has a couple of Serum Visions, but he's just going to get his steam. You know, he needs his colors here. So right away, he's already taken 3 damage.
Yeah, it's funny how you normally think against a beatdown deck, you know, an aggressive deck, that you want to defend your life total, but Affinity deals damage to such huge chunks. It's not normally 2 or 3 that matter. You know, they're hitting you for 9 or 11 or something crazy with cranial plating.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to think about how to play against Affinity because it's an aggressive deck, but it's not really...
It's a combo deck.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it relies on Cranial Plate, Arcbound Ravager, to an extent Steel Overseer, but yeah, it's not about incrementing damage most of the time.
Right.
All right, so we don't see a land.
Was there a 0 lander there for Christian Seibold?
Yeah, no land on top, but 2 lands when he scries. So
2 lands when he scries, okay. For Patrick, right,
Patrick,
right.
Yeah, Patrick going to be just fine.
So, but what's Seibold's hand look like? I see he's got double Glimmer Void, but he does have Darksteel Citadel as well.
He's got so he can dump Citadel, Opal, Welding Jar, Vault Scourge on the first turn. Seems good, but just not a whole lot besides that.
There's no damage in there.
Nothing to follow it up.
Yeah, he needs to draw a Cranial Plating or a Ravager. But basically only has the Vault Scourge right now.
Yeah, it would be pretty unbelievable to draw Master of Ethereum after that, but I don't even know if he has it in his deck. But he could protect it with Welding Jar. It would grow his Vault Scourge and his Ornithopter, and it itself would be huge.
So 4 permanents on the battlefield here on turn 1 for Christian Seibold means, well, he's off to a start. Like we said, he's going to need some backup here from the top of his deck.
Yep.
But let's see what Patrick Dickmann comes up with first. Serum Visions.
Yeah, and he's got a Bolt, too, so he's going to be able to at least even deal with that Vault Scourge, assuming that he cares about it.
Yeah, and, you know, he did last time. Remember, he bolted an early Vault Scourge, and it didn't... I mean, he ended up dying to an Inkmoth Nexus later. He might be more willing to try to save his instant speed removal spells for those man lands.
Yeah, I mean, because, Mox Opal going to be turned on with Welding Jar, Darksteel Citadel anyway, so you're not worried about reducing the number of artifacts to turn off those Moxes. We see a Springleaf Drum Ornithopter from Seibold's hand. Again,
mana.
just, not really accomplishing a whole lot.
And
yeah, this draw from Affinity does absolutely nothing right now.
Right, Patrick says, well, I'm going to take down that Vault Scourge anyway, and there's a Springleaf Drum and an Ornithopter.
I mean, these are exactly the situations where you really want Thoughtcast, and you want a lot of Thoughtcast.
Right, you want to start chaining them together.
Right, but again, I think he probably boarded out Thoughtcast because he's, we've seen Thoughtseize already. We've seen a lot of other sideboard cards, but maybe not. Maybe boarding out all the cheap, boarding out Memnites, boarding out Signal Pest gives you room to keep in Thoughtcast, which would be a lot better of a position for Seibold right here.
All right, Patrick, he drew a Snapcaster Mage, which is exactly the type of card that he wants to see to make this game go longer. He's got that Lightning Bolt sitting there too, so he can take out a threat. There's a Blinkmoth Nexus off the top for Christian, so something, but it's not that good here.
1 damage.
Right.
He needs... I mean, he would love to draw Cranial Plating or Arcbound Ravager. Even Steel Overseer would at least give him some game.
Right.
But yeah, this is a really awkward draw for the Affinity player.
All right, here's Pestermite on end step, though. He's going to target something.
You probably target, Blinkmoth here, so you can at least get in an attack. I mean, you're probably not attacking anyway, because you want to be able to block Cranial Plating.
Glimmer Void.
Oh, Glimmer Void,
Colored mana.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now at least you have to tap a creature or your Mox to be able to cast Galvanic Blast.
All right, he's going to attack with his Pestermite.
Offense.
Yeah.
Seems willing to trade.
All right.
Seibold's like, look, I've got an Ornithopter if I need to just attach something to something else.
Yeah. It's weird that both players would be willing to trade here.
That is interesting.
Yeah, that is weird.
It could be that Dickmann wants to Snapcaster Bolt the Nexus.
It could definitely be that. Christian Seibold has to respect.
Yep.
Oh, he's just got a Lightning Bolt here, though.
Oh,
he just played it out of his hand,
way.
Keeping Snapcaster Mage in hand. He's got a Flame Slash in his hand as well, which is nice insurance plan for a Steel Overseer here.
I really think that Seibold's post-board configuration is just extremely resilient to Flame Slash, though. I mean, the only good target
there's a
really
Ravager off the top.
Wow.
Sorry, Zach, I didn't mean to talk over you there. There's an Arcbound Ravager over the top, off the top, though.
Yeah, Ravager, I mean, as good as anything is going to be here. Still not maybe the most exciting, but, you know, you've got a lot of blank or nearly blank artifacts, and Ravager at least turns them into something meaningful.
So if Patrick draws a land here, can he attempt to Flame Slash the Ravager and then Lightning Bolt whatever the
Yeah, that's
counters
exactly
go
the
on
line
to?
I was looking at.
Yeah.
I mean, if I were Seibold here, I think I'd just throw everything I can at making Ravager big one by one. Assuming you have enough artifacts to make it a 5/5 and something to modular onto, I mean, that's not great, but you just don't really have another plan right now.
And so your plan is just Ravager itself is huge and just attack with it a bunch.
It's not a great plan.
No, I understand, yeah.
But so, yeah, I mean,
it does play around what we were saying.
Flame Slash plus Lightning Bolt could kill the Ravager, but all the counters might wind up on that Ornithopter.
Right.
Right. And speaking of that land, though, Patrick Dickmann does not find his 4th mana. So this could get interesting here. Mox Opal is going to get eaten.
Funny.
And replaced immediately.
Nice.
That's one way to play around the Legend rule.
It's actually pretty convenient for Flame Slash purposes. And now that lets him throw exclusively mana sources at Arcbound Ravager to get it to survive Flame Slash if he wants to. Also could get rid of the Welding Jar once you think things are big enough to not need to be regenerated. I mean, again, it's still not the greatest plan against a deck with a bunch of tappers and Cryptic Command, but at least it gets you somewhere.
It's a lot better than the plan he had before he top decked the Ravager.
Right.
So I think Patrick Dickmann has an Deceiver Exarch in his hand, and he's sort of held Christian up at the beginning of combat and is deciding if he wants to fire off that Deceiver Exarch here.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. He's got a Scavenging Ooze that he can't cast. He's got a Snapcaster Mage that's pretty good on Bolt, but 3 damage, likely not going to be enough damage to do what he wants it to. 3+2 from Snapcaster is not bad. That at least makes Seibold commit to the Ravager. But nothing he has in his hand actually deals on a permanent basis with the Ravager and its tokens.
Right.
I mean, all of that being said, I think for Dickmann, you still tap it down with Deceiver anyway. It gives you a line that opens you up to drawing Splinter Twin
the victory.
And land.
Yeah, and he's two away from that for sure. But
I guess he's already got Mastermind. But still, I just like not taking a bunch of damage here. I guess you can force him to commit now with Snapcaster Mage Bolt, but you're still going to let him attack before you do that.
And what does the big picture look like here? Like, Christian Seibold's plan is to attack with Arcbound Ravager a bunch of times.
All of our conversations about modularing onto Ornithopter don't matter because of Spellskite.
I was just looking up to see if Arcbound Ravager...
Okay. I think Spellskite can redirect the modular trigger on itself. Yeah.
Arcbound Ravager doesn't say your creature or creature you control. It's just on any
target artifact creature.
So Spellskite is an artifact creature. You can activate the ability and change that target to Spellskite. Probably one of the reasons why Spellskite is in Dickmann's deck right now.
Yep.
Not playing it as a steel wall. So
you sacrifice it.
Actually pretty relevant.
Lightning Bolt to Ravager.
All right, so what happened is Snapcaster Mage jumped in front of the Ravager. Darksteel Citadel got sacked to the Ravager, and in response, the Lightning Bolt from the Snapcaster Mage is now being targeted on the Ravager.
So again, this is going to
be... this line, the fact that Spellskite can steal the counters is huge here.
That's insane. I did not
gigantic.
know that.
And again, that's got to be why Spellskite is there.
Yep.
Right.
And it blunts the assault on the ground from like medium-sized threats in the process.
Now Christian Seibold's sacking
Does
a bunch
he know the
of
rule?
stuff.
Does he think these are going onto Ornithopter?
Well, or he could just try to make his Arcbound Ravager big enough. Yeah, that's
and I think that's what's going on, is he's just going to get 6 toughness. Yeah.
And there's 6.
And there it is. So the plan is Welding Jar Ravager. I know that none of this modular business works, and I'm going to be able to survive. I mean, I guess Spellskite can redirect Welding Jar, too. I mean, Spellskite is just unbelievable against all the cards that are good.
Wow.
But, so we've got a 6/6. Got Dickmann at 15. Sure. Cannot deal with the 6/6 just yet.
It's another Snapcaster.
He needs a land. If he'd gotten a land, he could have gone Flame Slash Lightning Bolt, taking out the Ravager.
Right.
He needs the 4th land because it's Snapcaster Lightning Bolt. Oh, he could have Snapcaster Flame Slash.
Yeah, you're still right, though, that he needs 4 lands to do that, to go Flame Slash, Snapcaster, Flame Slash.
Right. Draw step. Looks like an Inkmoth Nexus there for Christian Seibold.
Wow.
But he's on, right now, the Ravager plan, but that could change.
Tap it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says, wait a second now. I've got a Deceiver Exarch here. I'm going to tap down your Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah, he needs a 4th land before Ravager's capable of getting to 8/8.
What?
It's a 9/9.
Ravager has, what, 6 counters on it? Yeah, right. So even if you threw away his entire
There's a Welding
board,
Jar, there's a Nexus. That gets it to 8/8, but double Flame Slash kills it.
Yep.
Land?
Well, that also kills it.
Ancient Grudge is good. Now, he doesn't have flashback mana available, but he can just kill the thing and then, like we talked about
Steal the Welding
earlier,
Jar activation.
Right.
and steal the Ravager itself if he tries to move him off. So,
I mean, this just highlights how crazy of a format Modern is. There's all these subtle
insane.
interactions. You know, it's not like modular. The interaction doesn't even occur in the game text of the card. You have to read the italicized text to get the wording of how exactly it functions. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it just shows Dickmann's mastery of this format. All right, so there's an artifact. So it could theoretically survive double Flame Slash at this point. But this highlights exactly why playing post-board games with Affinity can be so problematic. Your opponent's decks are just full of things like Ancient Grudge that even your answers to, and Spellskite, right, that even your answers to still put you pretty far behind. Just kind of a resigned sigh.
yeah. Can listen in for a minute down on the feature match areas. Ravager attacks.
Another thing that we're looking at is potentially what a Snapcaster again, just blocking, or I mean, he shifted to the front, but you got an Ancient Grudge here, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Ancient Grudge off from Arcbound Ravager.
Ancient Grudge or Ravager. Seibold double checks that one card he has in his hand. That's not going to do anything.
I was looking to see if Ravager was a you may, because if it wasn't a you may, that could like go from Spellskite is pretty good to like Spellskite just won you the game.
Yeah.
But it is in fact a you may. And I mean, Seibold looking to see, okay, do I Welding Jar it? Then that makes him pay a blue. You know?
He is going to regenerate here, though.
Yeah. Exactly. Which actually is really, like, even if he had a way to counter the Ancient Grudge.
He's going to put counters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that
There's the hand.
is going to do it. Patrick Dickmann is going to advance to the semifinals here.
Wow. Spellskite, Ancient Grudge.
They're consoling each other. Yeah, he said you couldn't have done anything else. So.
Yeah.
Yep, that was going to be it there. So we have Patrick Dickmann into the semifinals. Welcome back to the booth. Marshall Cycle here with Zach Hill and Randy Buehler. Some great stuff today from the quarters. I think we have a lot to look forward to for the semis and the finals.
Oh, I'm excited to see. I mean, this has been some of the most incredible Magic I've watched in a long time.
Yeah, these are great matches. Yeah. All right. So why don't we head over and we're going to get recaps and a view on what's been going on from a big picture perspective on our top 8. Let's head over to the news desk where BDM, Rich, and LSV await.
We do await. Thank you very much to the guys in the booth. Stellar job through not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 live quarterfinals. First time, little bit of history BDM. Let's take a look at the big board and you can talk us through the morning that we've just worked our way through. So here was the top 8 coming in and we began BDM.
We began with Li Shitian and Ansi Alkio. Kind of like looked like maybe the first game was going to go Li Shitian's way, but it didn't turn out that way. And Ansi Alkio was able to take 2 games with his Splinter Twin deck and advance past Li Shitian.
Okay, so let's put Ansi Alkio through to the semifinals then. And then we came to quarterfinal 2, which was Jacob Wilson against Chris Fennell, 3 against 6. Luis, what happened there? There you go.
In the first game, mostly it's that Chris Fennell failed to win because Jacob Wilson didn't pressure him enough that he should have won. But Chris, his deck fizzled, which Storm does sometimes. I actually talked to him after the match, and he was not too happy about that, understandably.
Of course, of course.
And then Game 2, Jacob had a Thought Seize and an Abrupt Decay, which actually was enough disruption to prevent Chris from winning.
So that sets up the bottom semi-final. Then the top half of the bracket, we had blue-white-red against blue-white-red twin, which is quite a mouthful. That was Sean McLaren against Tim Rivera. BDM, what happened with that one?
It was actually Tim Rivera's Splinter Wall deck that got threads of disloyaltied by Sean McLaren, and he was able to just use his card drawing engine, or his opponent's card drawing engine, to just bury his opponent behind an undefeatable hand. I mean, it was just, there was no possible way out.
Yeah, that was pretty extraordinary. And then we got our fourth quarterfinal where we were following along on social media, and Brian Kibble, who's out in the rest of the building here, I know was watching that match and said that when Christian Seibold with Affinity/Robots won the second game, one person cheered, and it was Alex Matchletson, who's been playing that deck since the very beginning of the format. So we fill up our semi-finals with Patrick Dickmann there. So McLaren against Dickmann, Alkio against Wilson, half the remaining field from Canada, as it were. Bjorg, are you going to claim Jacob Wilson? You kind of are.
I think the fact that he, lived in Northern California for enough time and is basically considered a local player seems close enough.
Why don't we go with North American, and then we sort of best of both.
Definitely that.
But he's definitely yet another player out of the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Out of that scene, that Magic scene in the Bay Area that's grown out of around the Superstars store.
Yeah, I think that, like when I was living there with, David Ochoa and Josh Utter-Layton kind of like getting onto the Pro Tour and becoming fixtures at this point. And now we have Sam Pardee and Jacob Wilson, Matt Nast, when he can. And
Shahar.
Yeah, Shahar Shenhar, actually. He homegrown as well from Sacramento. So we've had quite a good crop.
And it turns out that can lead to teams, he said, seamlessly segueing into our team segment. And for the next 10 minutes, for those of you who've been watching over the last couple of days, as you know, one of the big stories this weekend is that finally the penny has dropped and a lot of teams have got organized and followed the model of Luis and friends from Team Channel Fireball and said, let's rent a house, let's get organized, let's get testing, let's set out the emails weeks, months in advance. Luis, I want to ask you, it's easy to say, oh, we all want to win, as what are the purposes of a team? But apart from the glib answer, why? Why put a team together?
I guess the most important reason is that you want to increase your chances of doing well in the tournament by preparing the best way you can. And that really means trying to break the format, trying to come up with something awesome that no one else has, or failing that, the best list of something that other people have.
Now, did that work against you guys with a modern format, which maybe is a little more impervious to breakage?
Yeah, modern format is not as fragile. And as we were actually talking about before, we spent a lot of time trying a bunch of different decks to try to figure out, an unknown way to attack the format. Ended up not really finding that. And as a result, instead of spending 3 weeks tuning, say, a Splinter Twin or a Malira deck, ended up playing, well, no matter what we ended up playing, it wasn't tuned quite as long as we would have liked.
It was a deck you ended up with, as opposed to a deck you started out with and sort of shaved and honed and carefully worked to adjust with the metagame.
Yeah, and I think in general, the strategy of trying to break it is the one that's going to net you the highest overall rewards, especially since everyone's so good at Magic these days. Right. The average player is very good.
Right.
You really want to just come with something that has just like an absurd win percentage if the things are correct. But yes, in this case, we would have been better off just tuning a random tier 1 deck and just playing that for 3 weeks.
And something like Standard might be easier to break because especially at a Pro Tour level, because every time we see a Standard Pro Tour, there's recently been 100 new cards, 300 new cards, even more than that, brought into the format because each time it's a new thing. Where with Modern, maybe 5, 6, 7 cards from Born of the Gods are relevant to Modern.
Yeah, when the format's changing by 1% instead of 50%, there is less opportunity there.
All right, so why don't we do a blisteringly fast rundown of some of the biggest teams. Some of them we've been watching throughout the weekend. Some of them, well, it was when we ran the data this morning and went, wow, they did pretty well. So let's take you through. Here's a selection of teams at this weekend's Pro Tour Born of the Gods. And we begin with 13 Angry Men. What do we got there, Luis?
So we've got a team captained somewhat by Matthias Hunt, who was playing the pretty awesome Amulet of Vigor deck.
Isn't that sweet?
And
yeah.
That's actually a feature of most of the teams. I don't think I know any team where everyone was on the same deck. I don't think anyone came to the conclusion, this is it, we have all got to play it. So got Matthias Hunt, Jasper Johnson Epstein, Stephen Neal, Timothy Thomason, Eduardo Borges, David Parg, Daniel Sondek, Bing Luke, who actually played against in the tournament.
Yep.
And then Greg Ogrenk and Andre Prost.
So I feel sorry for Jasper Johnson Epstein. He is exactly where that is his record at pretty much everything. And then we see him on Facebook winning the next PT.
But he you know what? He kind of crushed Modern. Like, I think he went 7-2-1 in Modern.
Right.
And he wasn't playing the Amulet deck.
Right.
He was playing the Bump in the Night deck. He was just soaking people in gasoline and flicking matches at them all weekend.
Yeah, he said, I'm just going to set them on fire.
Yeah.
So that's Team 13 Angry Men. We've only just started, but we're almost finished, just like this team. Here they come. BDM.
This is team almost finished. We have Ansi Alkio still playing. We don't know what the final result will be here. We saw Ben Yu on Twitter talking about helping play test this matchup all night, and was surprised that Ansi was able to beat a pair of resolved Vidalcan Shackles. He's like, that wasn't something we saw in our play test session. Right. Max Sobloom, Juicy Turnatkoski.
Do you feel pretty much satisfied if you put anyone into the top 8 when you're this kind of number of in a team? If you're like 7 to 10, is that the goal? One person in the top 8 as a team we've won, Luis, do you think?
Yeah, if you have any size team, if you put someone in the top 8, you're happy. If you have a 7 to 10 person team, you really cannot be disappointed if that happens.
It also makes all the hard work. Like, you do all this hard work, get ready for the event, you don't do well, but your teammate gets through, you're like, oh, okay, I have a stake in this, I took part in this, and my hard work mattered for this event, and it's very encouraging coming back to the next Pro Tour, I would have to assume.
Yeah.
Right, it definitely
that could have been me, that kind of thing.
Well, these guys are going to be very encouraged then. Here comes the team of Austria / Germany, sort of European All-Stars, if you like. Here's a bunch of them, and that makes them very pleasing reading, Luis.
Yeah, just the fact that the first two names, Christian Seibold and Patrick Dickmann, both made top 8 is pretty absurd, especially since you've got a team of around 12, 15 people, and having 2 in the top 8 is very impressive.
Yeah, and the next guy's down as well, 10-5, 10-5, 10-6, roundabout there. Just a tremendous effort from them. Now, the next team I want to look at, we haven't really seen this weekend, but I just wanted to mention them. Team Cerberus. These are from right the other side of the world, and BDM.
I've talked to both Justin Chung and Daniel Unwin in my column a handful of times. Both very good deck builders, people who really tackle standard a lot, fixtures of the APAC Grand Prix circuit, and
sure, we'll see them in Melbourne next weekend.
Absolutely, and not at all surprised to see Justin doing well, and again, sort of probably within a match or two of being contending for top 8.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to move on now to a team that Luis may find difficult to comment on because it's the opposition. It's CFB Pantheon, and in the end, with sort of 2-3 rounds to go, that table looked kind of disappointing. But as so often happens with the best players, they bear down and they grind their way through the back end of the tournament and end up with an awful lot of people with very solid 11-4-1 records.
Yeah, and even though they ended up with a very impressive win percentage, but that wasn't true after day 1, which means on day 2 their win percentage must have been absurd. I think they ended up with around a 65% win percentage overall, which again is very good, but their day 2 percentage had to be reasonably higher than that, and they put a lot of people in the top 25, like 5 people in the top 25, Rich Hone at 26, and multiple people in the top 16.
Yeah, so kind of as you'd expect, a whole room full of some of the greatest players of all time did quite well at a Magic tournament. Yeah, kind of what we'd expect. Why don't we take a look at CFB? What are we calling them now these days, BDM?
I've been calling them Channel Fireball Prime.
Prime works.
I think it's going to stick, too, because I've seen people using it on Twitter without me paying them $1. So
we should figure out what our directive is, and then we'll be good.
So BDM,
win more.
You and I can talk about them. Luis can not listen. 10-5-1 for Frank Carsten. He was running Affinity Robots. Benny beat down 10-6. The same for Eric, Pat Cox, Brock Parker. And then a whole bunch of 9-7s and just winning records. People like that Louis Scott Vargas guy was in there.
How much do you think you guys got hurt by Blood Moon in this event, Luis?
Blood Moon did account for a number of our losses. Our 2 highest finishers were Frank and Ben both playing Affinity, and their Affinity deck was very good. I think it was very well tuned. But overall, yeah, our modern performance wasn't great. We had our best limited Pro Tour to date. which means that if you look at those scores, we did not do well in Modern.
Yeah, you were fantastic in draft, though. No question with that. Plenty more to bring you. Let's wade through these super fast. Here is Team Doge. Now, this is the group that was notionally led by ranked player Christian Calcano. He did not have a great day at the office on day one, but nonetheless, they got 3 people further up. You see Ted McCluskey, 8-7, before we just decided, no, I'm not going to play the last round. 9-7 for Brendan DeCandio.
By the way, great job, Brendan. Brendan's someone I know from back. My parents live in Tampa. I think this was his 2nd Pro Tour. He was really excited about this, really wanted to come here and do better. And you know, that's a big part of going to the Pro Tour. We talk about getting into a top 8 in your first handful of Pro Tours. This is someone who's only played very few Pro Tours, having a really nice performance where he got through to day 2. I know he's excited about that.
Yeah, well done to him. Kevin Actil led that team. Let's move on. Elaborate Ruse, basically European, a bunch of Czech players, Slovaks, and the Swedes. Very, very solid numbers there. You see Matej Zatelkai from the European coverage team leading the way, even Flock, Hall of Famer Olarada, Rashid, Sivka, Londas, and co. Pretty decent. Willie Adel had a disappointing weekend. I think he, more than many people, will have been hurt by the loss of Deathrite Shaman, because he's a poster child.
He was still playing Jund.
Yes. Perhaps he didn't find out about the ban.
I think it was called 56 card Jund.
Yeah.
Do you play the Foras as Bauble instead of the DRS and just see what happened?
Barb Sextant.
Yeah, stop it. All right, let's look at face-to-face games. That's up next, and this is a big success story. Just tremendous. This is the essentially Team Canada with plenty of US interlopers. You've got Wilson, obviously, in the top 8. You've got Josh McLean and Sam Pardy, who are right in the hunt.
All 3 of those players were in the mix all the way down the stretch of day 2.
Yeah, and then 3 more 10 and 6s. That's a tremendous record. Of course, some people are not going to get into day 2 because that's just inevitable when you play that many matches. You put that many people in a room, you've got 12 players there. So over the course of the weekend, of course, you're going to have a 1-5, a 2-6, and so on. But great performance by face-to-face games. Let's take a look at Flipside Gaming. And this, again, was an unheralded team coming in. But I just wanted to sort of touch on this because this is the kind of team that's within reach for a PTQ.
By the way, unheralded, but, you know, Dan Jordan, multiple Pro Tour top 16s.
Yeah.
Max Brown, a Star City Invitational winner. Someone who's just won, you know, some ridiculous, like he's crossing off his United States map of states he's won PTQs in. You know, someone who's you know, really highly regarded. But Jared Betchner is really the story there to me because he also had the bizarre deck of the tournament that he were not expecting. He was playing Ad Nauseam.
Ah, right.
The Angel's Grace Ad Nauseam deck.
Angel's Grace Ad Nauseam deck. Yeah, I don't think I saw anyone else with that deck in this field.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many were in the field total, but it's a pretty sweet deck. I mean, I remember even testing it for PT Amsterdam a couple years ago, and it's got all the same cards, so it's always lurking, waiting in the background.
Right.
Let's take a look at MTG Mint. They're up next, the Pan Asia Pacific All-Stars, and they put Li Shi-chan into the top 8. Menki Zhan 10-5-1. Plenty of even to positive records. Chapman Sim, shout out for him from the coverage team in the Asia Pacific region. Ken Yukihiro probably a bit disappointed with 7-7, and Su Ching Kuo definitely disappointed with 3 and 5.
Ken Yukihiro, worth pointing out there, that is the person who originated the Blue Moon deck back at Pro Tour Return to Ravnica.
Yep. Right, absolutely. It's worth keeping your eye on deck lists. Turns out you can use them for yourself a little later on. 2 to go. Let's look at Team Revolution then. This Raf Levy, Melissa DeTora and co. You see Jeremy Desani. Now, he was so far off the radar. We eliminated him from top 8 contention BDM in the first round of Modern on day 2 when he lost to Kai.
Right.
But then, having the spotlight gone off him, he still then wins his last 4.
And finishes, you know, I think it was top 25, top 20.
Yeah, top 18th.
So follows up winning a Pro Tour with a top 20 finish. You know, that's kind of a formula for Player of the Year.
Yeah, that's a very good start.
Yeah, especially when you take away his #1 toy. He said to me at Paris last weekend, if they hadn't got rid of Deathrite Shaman, I would have thought I could go back to back. But they did, and, you know, so I'm sure he'll be very pleased again with, like you say, a terrific finish. And that brings us to another one of the breakouts is they've got to be super pleased with themselves. TCG player, BDM.
Chris Fennell, I mean, that to me is the big story here. You know, the 2 big acquisitions over the last 2 Pro Tours for this team. Conley Woods, who, you know, talked a little bit about maybe having an existential crisis on Team Channel Fireball where he felt, you know, there wasn't this ability to... he professed nothing but love and admiration and just like, these guys are the best, but I need to go do my wacky thing. And Chris Fennell, who is, you know, a limited, you know, superstar over the last 2 Pro Tours, picking these guys up. Formerly Team Luxurious Hair. Chris Fennell, been playing for 10, 12 years on the Pro Tour, finally gets through to his top 8 and does it, you know, again, you know, doing better in Modern, fewer losses in Modern than he had in Limited.
All right, so whole bunch of teams there. If you win your next PTQ, get a bunch of people together. They don't all have to be world superstars. I mean, Luis might let you on his team if you ask him super nicely. That's probably not actually going to happen. But best of luck. Come join us at the next PT if you can. Right now, there's 4 people waiting to see whether they get $40,000 US. One of them is Patrick Dickmann. Yesterday, he came into the news desk to talk all about his deck, Tarmo Twin. So why don't we take a look?